Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, April 17th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Stellantis doubles down on AI with Microsoft. Canada's EV sales surge after incentives return. And Stellantis' plan to build Chinese EVs in Brampton gets rejected. Plus, Matthias Stoever of RockEd talks about why training service advisors is more critical than ever.
If you just force people to do training, then also training gets painful and becomes something that they see it as something that doesn't add value for them.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Stellantis has a new 5-year AI deal with Microsoft. The two companies are co-developing more than 100 AI projects, everything from customer care to how they build cars. They are also setting up an AI-powered cyber defense center to catch threats faster and keep connected vehicles and customer data safe. And it's not just for the cars. Stellantis is rolling out Microsoft's Copilot chat to all employees, starting with 20,000 licenses. Yesterday on the show, we talked about how EV registrations have continued to fall through February here in the U.S., but it's a different story north of the border. Canada's zero-emission vehicle sales jumped 47% in February compared to a year earlier. That's according to Statistics Canada. The federal government brought back purchase incentives on February 16th, offering up to $5,000 off EVs and $2,500 off plug-in hybrids. The incentives made a difference. EVs captured over 10% of new vehicle sales in February, up from just 6.9% the year before when buyers had no rebates to lean on. And staying in Canada, Stellantis' pitch to assemble Chinese Leapmotor EVs from knockdown kits at its idled Brampton plant has been rejected by Unifor and Canadian governments. The proposal would have employed just 200 to 300 workers, far below 3,000 who previously built cars there. According to Bloomberg, the project faced tariff and trade barriers, making it economically unworkable. Here to talk more about it is David Kennedy, Toronto bureau chief of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada. David, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks for having me.
So David, why did Unifor and the federal government say no to this? And are there any alternatives that would support more jobs in Brampton?
Well, as you said, it's jobs. It really comes down to jobs. 3,000 people or so hourly workers worked at that plant beforehand. And there's no way, certainly the union is going to accept 2 to 300, which is, the estimate for what could work at a CKD plant, at least the way that they're proposing it. And the government's really the same way. They committed money to Stellantis, retooling that plant to build the Jeep Compass. And at least so far, we're not seeing any movement on, what they're going to allow to happen. So the talks continue, but at least to me, a straight CKD operation, unless they beef it up with, some local assembly, at which point maybe it doesn't become CKD anymore. It's tough to imagine that this is going to fly.
Now, what makes the economics of CKD assembly so unworkable in Canada compared to how Stellantis uses it in Europe?
Right. Well, we've talked to a few people about this. And the thing is, in Europe, the rules of origin on vehicles can be a little bit different than in North America and Canada in particular. What we could see in Europe, or what we did see in some instances in Europe with Chinese vehicle kits coming over, is that, you actually see origin change on that product. So, if a product's pieced together in Poland, for instance, after coming from China in a kit, the origin of that vehicle becomes Europe. And that's not in every case. There's some nuance behind it. But in Canada, that's just not going to happen. If it comes in a kit from China, even if it's pieced together, final assembly in Canada, that vehicle is still originating from China, essentially, is the way things work. As you can imagine, a Chinese origin vehicle is probably also not going to be for export to the United States, which makes it really challenging to make the economics work to sell just for the Canadian market.
David Kennedy, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
Coming up, Matthias Stoever talks about the critical need to train service advisors as dealerships face staffing challenges. That's next on Daily Drive.
The Iran war is squeezing global supply chains, and one of the biggest pressure points right now is helium. Experts say shortages could start causing problems soon.
The East and Southeast Asian facilities are already starting to run low on helium supply, and I think we will see production shortages starting in the next weeks.
On this week's episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, I'm joined by Stefan Kies, senior partner at Roland Berger North America. He explains why the conflict is constricting helium supply. We'll get into why that matters for semiconductor production and ultimately critical vehicle technologies like high-end driver assistance features, memory chips, and power electronics. I'm Molly Boygon. Join me on Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Service departments are a critical profit center for dealerships, but many are struggling with staffing challenges. Matthias Stoever is founder and CEO of RockEd, an automotive training company. He spoke with Automotive News senior retail editor Dan Shine on this week's Fixed Ops Friday edition of Daily Drive.
Matthias, thanks so much for joining me on the Fixed Ops Friday edition of Daily Drive.
Thank you, Dan. Excited to be here. Let's talk fixed ops.
Yes. First, let's talk RockEd. Give the folks out there who may be not sure who you are or need a refresher, tell us what you guys do.
Yeah, my name's Matthias. Sounds German, and it is German. I was born and raised in Germany, and then went on one date with a girl from Pittsburgh. And next thing you know, you're talking to car dealerships all over the country about fixed operations. 5 years ago, together with my co-founders, I started a company called RockEd, which is the leading learning and performance management platform for car dealers. We believe that everybody who works in the dealership needs a lot of skills to be successful in their day-to-day, to be able to perform, to deliver great customer experiences. And we build a platform that makes it as easy as possible to acquire and build and sharpen those skills.
So you got something new called Booster, which combines your learning platform with live performance leaderboards and kind of tailors coaching, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to take a step back. Everybody talks about how important training is, whether it be in sales, whether it be in service. But it doesn't seem like a lot of training gets done. Is that just because service departments are just so busy and stressed that there's just not the time, that they don't commit to it?
The problem with training is probably what Henry Ford said about marketing, right? That 50% of the money is wasted. You just don't know which half it is. A version of that is probably also true for training, because yes, training is important, but why should I train? Right? Nobody trains for just the purpose of training. No professional sports player just does training because they like to train. Like, they want to win, they want to improve their performance, and they want to see results. And what we also learned is with our own product, with our customers, is that if we cannot show a result and a way for somebody to get better, people will lose interest in training. People will question if training is relevant. And yes, that is where we built a new product, because that is what we're wanting to overcome, to really closely link performance to training.
The new learning platform, the Booster, is, I think, kind of targets service advisors, which, a very stressful position, a lot of turnover, but it's the service advisor is stuck between the technician who's demanding, the customer who's demanding. Talk about the role of the service advisor and how important they are to, profits and revenue in fixed operations.
Yeah, no service drive without a service advisor. If you don't have service advisors, you'll be out of business in a couple of days. So yes, it is an absolutely crucial role for every store. I see the service advisor as the glue that holds a lot of things together between the technician, the vehicle, the customer, all the systems. Sometimes like the warranty companies, anybody who's in between there, and they're constantly juggling and keeping the lights on for everybody, including the customer. And yeah, so that is a very stressful job, and also a job that requires a lot of skills, because sometimes you need to be technically versed. Sometimes you almost need to be more of a therapist. Then you need to be a project manager who juggles in between different departments. And I think it's a crucial role. And of course, a service advisor who handles a lot of business also drives millions in revenue every year.
Yeah, very important role. Tell me how Booster helps improve the performance of a service advisor.
So what we've seen is when we talk to dealerships is that you have a big differences in performance, a spread between high performing, low performing, average performing service advisors. Let's look, for example, at a product like tires. The stores that we work with, some larger groups in the country, oftentimes we see that a very high performing service advisor on a product like tires sells 10 times more tires than somebody who, for whatever reason, is just not focused on tires. And we see this on all of the products, like whether this in tires, in brakes, in alignments. There are service advisors who are crushing it on recommending those services to their customers and having a customer make that investment into their vehicle, and others are not. And I think this spread is a huge opportunity for every dealer. It's also like affecting the customer experience, because it should not affect me as a customer. That should not differ which service advisor I see. If somebody like talks with me about my tires, talks with me about my brakes, like I should have a very uniform experience. And this differences that oftentimes it's 5 or 10 times more sales between service advisors in the same store, right, that see the same group of customers. That is what we address, because I think that's a big opportunity for improving the customer experience. And of course, it's also a big opportunity to drive service revenues for any dealership, a big opportunity to drive customer retention.
I think what also we talked a little bit earlier about, well, maybe more service departments don't do training, is they can't afford people to leave the store and to go maybe offsite for 3 days of a training session, and there's cost involved and all. I guess discuss how being able to kind of train service advisors and do it while they're still working, they're still performing, but it's kind of like in little, I guess maybe smaller bites, and it's not a huge commitment that's going to take them away from their role.
What I sometimes see is broken with training is that we don't explain people well enough, like why they need to train and why it is important. And I think that's what we're trying to change here by first and foremost showing people their performance and making them understand how they're performing, for example, on a product like tires and brakes, and showing a service advisor that they're either the best in their store or that they are somebody who has a lot of opportunity. Because clearly, if I'm below the average of my store, it means that if I were a service advisor, I leave money on the table. Most service advisors are paid almost exclusively on commission. And I think that is what I think with the industry can still do a better job in explaining people, like, why should you train? And that's the first thing that we're doing. And I think if you show somebody how they have gaps, how they have opportunities, where they could get better, I think that also makes people much more receptive to then sharpen those skills. Right? And every sports player gets that same feedback, right? If you're playing golf, you can now have a golf app that views your swing and tells you where you need to improve. And of course, that's like a light bulb moment for somebody now to maybe go back, get a coach, and work on it. If you don't get that feedback on your own performance, it's hard to convince people to do training. And then if you just force people to do training, then also training gets painful and becomes something that people find like they see it as something that doesn't add value for them.
And I think a lot of what service advisors do is, the good ones is relationship building. And it's not just upselling tires and brakes and things just to make money. It's that you know the customer, how their driving habits are, if they have children or they go to soccer practice every day, whatever it might be. If you get to know them and you get to a relationship, and you can then make suggestions on, and like you probably need to be thinking about tires. If not this time, next time you come, you're probably going to need them. And I think the relationship building then, I would imagine, can lead to service retention, and then also perhaps that customer buying a new car from you next time around.
Yeah, I mean, it is called service advisor for a reason. We're not calling them service upsell agent, and I think that's really important to remember, right? I come into a store with my vehicle. I'll probably go with that vehicle 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. I have 2 kids that are in the back. And now I need somebody to advise what I do with this asset, right? There are safety concerns. There are things that might increase the value of my asset, that might help improve the performance. And sometimes I also need somebody to advise me that maybe it's time to not invest all this money into a vehicle, and maybe talk to sales. And somebody who's able to advise a customer on all these topics, they will immediately have the trust. A customer will not feel that they're being sold something. A customer will return to the store. That is, again, where you need to have the communication skills. You also need to have the product knowledge to explain to somebody why they, for example, need new brake pads, or why it would be beneficial for the vehicle to add new tires to it, and what that means for the safety of the vehicle.
Matthias, great stuff. Interesting to talk about service and training. Very important things for service departments to do. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan.
RockEd CEO Matthias Stoever spoke with Automotive News Senior Retail Editor Dan Shine. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News Executive Producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Vince Bond Jr. for his reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from David Kennedy of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada. You can get the latest news on service training, manufacturing plans, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our own Larry Bellaquette and Michael Martinez break down the week's biggest stories, including big changes for Ford as their tech leader departs.
The timing of his departure is a little suspect, but I was talking with a lot of folks within the company this week. Everybody says this was not a force out.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.